Good morning. My name is LaQuanda Gilmore, and I would like to welcome you to the K-5 Elementary Math Back to School Teacher PD. Thank you so much for being here today. We recognize that it is your second day back from summer and you have many other tasks to take care of, so we wanted to let you know we appreciate and value the time you will spend with us throughout this morning. Just a few housekeeping items. By participating in today's synchronous PD, you have the opportunity to earn a total of 6 credit hours or 6 CEUs if you attend all 4 content sessions. So be sure to complete each session that you attendance. Also, there will be knowledge-based questions you will be asked to respond to at the end to ensure that you have left today's PD having learned the intended content. There will be quick checks along the way to support you. If you are not yet sitting with your PLC, you may want to think about transitioning to a collaborative space as you will need to engage with each other throughout the duration of our time spent together. As you prepare to engage during today's session, please make sure that you have access to your grade-specific note catcher. You should be sitting with your PLC and have one representative chosen as the note taker on behalf of your grade level. You will be viewing the slides along with us today, but there is an FAQ available should you have any questions. We will work to answer your questions as soon as possible. You can continue to add questions and frequently check back to review responses. If you have participated in Crown Academy, you are not required to participate today. However, there will be content discussed today that you have not had the opportunity to participate in. You are encouraged to stay, plan, and engage with your PLC. This is the team of 6 elementary math curriculum instructional specialists. We are extremely excited to be here with you today. Here is how we will spend our time together. We will take the first 45 minutes level setting on accelerated learning, lesson flow, and lesson structure all together. We will then break out in grade-specific rooms to unpack Unit 1 to determine the continuum of learning and the trajectory of lessons. And lastly, we will finish our time together to hear K-5 math updates and conduct our knowledge-based questions to determine mastery of today's learning and to complete attendance. We wanted to start today off by celebrating you and the hard work you put into year 1 implementation of a new curriculum. Though the results are unofficial, preliminary data looks extremely good. These are our working agreements for today's math session. They list how we agree to participate, collaborate, and interact with each other today. Take a moment to read those agreements and select one that you will commit to. And here are our session learning outcomes. We will explore how accelerated learning or just-in-time supports ensures all students have access to grade level content. We will anticipate possible barriers and solutions for year 2 implementation of the IM CMS math curriculum. We will examine activities or tasks to develop the story for how the math content builds throughout Unit 1. We will unpack a standard that is aligned to Unit 1, and we will make a plan to continue the work. Within your PLCs, take a moment to check in on each other.
Hey everyone, I'm Stephanie Conlin, one of the 6 elementary math specialists, and I want to talk to you for a little bit about accelerated learning. This is something you're going to be hearing quite a bit about in CMS this year. We're going to start the conversation with math, and you're going to be hearing from all content areas this year in terms of our just-in-time support strategy to support accelerated learning for our students. Part of the why behind the reason that we choose to focus on accelerated learning is because of this quote. As it stands now, students' chances to learn challenging content depend on whether they are lucky enough to attend a school that provides it. In effect, a defense of localism and questions about content amounts to a defense of inequality in opportunity to learn. And so we're trying to level the playing field in terms of the opportunities that students have to learn and be successful with grade level content, challenging grade level content. So we know we have a lot to celebrate from last year as our first year of implementing our new curriculum, but we're going to keep moving our work forward because we have even more students that we want to get on board with these opportunities to learn rigorous, challenging content. And the reason for that is we know that the stakes are high for students in North Carolina. Here we see a social mobility map across the United States, and this highlights the chances that a child from a low income family can move up in income distribution. So how do they move up from one socioeconomic status to another? And as we see here, children in North Carolina are at high risk of not moving in positive directions in that income distribution. So we want to continue to reach all students. We're going to use this strategy of accelerated learning to do so. Accelerated learning is not remediation, and it's not spending significant time in below grade level content before moving on to something new. It's not exactly re-engagement either. And our old known phrase for acceleration in TD and AIG, I just also want to put this out here that accelerated learning feels different from that as well. So what do I mean by that? We're going to take a couple minutes now just to focus on our learning and teaching definition of accelerated learning and taking a look at the components of accelerated learning. So we're going to pause the video. I want you to take a moment, really three minutes, to read about accelerated learning. It's in your note catcher, this exact page right here, and just talk at your table groups about what you notice and what you wonder. Hopefully you're surrounded by some coworkers right now that you can do this work alongside, just to make for better discussion. And if not, maybe just jot some notes for yourself. What are some things you notice and what are some things you wonder? Just pause the video to do that. Make sure you pause because, at some point I'm going to keep going. All right, so we are going to think about grade level focus, systematic implementation, and long-term perspective first. We're going to do that part together. And then I'm going to ask you to be jumping in for data-driven approach, just-in-time supports, and access and opportunities in a moment. So where do grade level focus, systematic implementation, and long-term perspective show up in our curriculum? Frequently, these three components show up in many places across our lesson narratives. Grade level focus can be always identified by the standard in the upper right hand corner of the lesson, but also the learning goals, as the learning goals relate students' work for the day back to part of one of the standards for that grade level. And so oftentimes when we see the standard here, like the example I have focuses on a second grade standard OA2, but to just broadly say we're doing the work of OA2 today in lesson 3 in unit 1, that really doesn't help us focus on how the work relates to this standard. And so when we read the learning goal, find the number that makes equations within 20 true using relationships between addition and subtraction. When we've done the work of unpacking the standard, then we understand how that learning goal really supports that work of mastery toward that standard. For systematic implementation, this comes through in a lot of different ways. I think about our curriculum guides being K-5. I think of a lot of the things that we do that is consistent for students to access grade level content across grade levels. But I also think about at the classroom level, that the lesson timeline is a very specific example of systematic implementation. So if we're spending the right amount of time on warm-ups and activities and the synthesis and the cool down, then we're allowing students to have varied experiences around meeting that learning goal throughout their day. And that's part of systematic implementation. For long-term perspective, I have the blue part highlighted from the lesson narrative, and that's because a lot of times when we read a narrative, we hear about what students are doing now, how it connects to their previous lessons work, their previous grade level work, and where the work is going. And so we get a zoomed out kind of sense of how today's lesson and learning fits into their story of the unit. Okay, like I said, I want you to take some time now to work on the other components. So also in your note catcher, and I just have a second grade example up here on the screen, but you're gonna look in your note catcher. The next page after this page with the definitions, you should see a lesson. And what I want you to do is scroll to that lesson and take 5 minutes to examine where these highlighted parts, the data-driven approach, just-in-time supports, and access and opportunities, where do those things show up in the curriculum? If we can find them for one lesson at your grade level, and we know that all lessons on the grade level are structured pretty much the same way because it's systematic, then we can generalize about these three biggies across our curriculum. So you're going to take a couple minutes now to do that. So pause now to read through the lesson and note, where do you see support for you as a teacher for implementing a data-driven approach, for support in implementing just-in-time supports, and how do we address access and opportunities through our curriculum narrative. So take a couple minutes now to read your lesson narrative and note where those things show up. Oh yeah, make sure you pause because again, you know me, I'm gonna keep going, but this is really important work that sets the stage for accelerated learning for the year. So make sure you pause to do it. So for data-driven approach, a lot of times I hear people say that there are things that they're supposed to look for, monitor for students who are doing a certain strategy or thinking out loud a certain way or working with their partner on something specific. And that is absolutely true. When we think about monitoring for students who do certain things, they're giving us those opportunities to gather some data. I've also heard teachers say, and this slide is just about just-in-time supports, but it's making me think for data. I've heard teachers say that the warm-ups do a great job of giving us some insight into what students already know, and that the warm-ups also offer opportunities for access because we're hearing from different students' perspectives throughout the warm-up. We want to encourage students to engage in conversations where they analyze other people's thinking. A lot of our activities do that as well as they compare strategies in a lot of their lessons. The purple boxes are a good just-in-time support. In every lesson, you're probably noticing advancing student thinking. Sometimes that box is about anticipating a common misconception and what to do about it. Support for multilingual learners. Sometimes those are just great anchor chart ideas that we can pull into our lessons as well. Maybe we throw some of these ideas up on the slides so that we can remember to implement them. And the same is true for the purple boxes for students with disabilities. So monitoring for students who is also in the lesson, and then sometimes the materials. The centers are an opportunity for students to practice their fluency skills where they are. And a lot of times the materials include things like having connecting cubes available for students to use or a tool for students to use, thereby making the math more accessible to all learners. We also have linked, I'm going to go back to the lesson example here, and in the quick links for the lesson, let me see if I can find one that has the example. Yeah, in the quick links for the lesson, you'll notice like where it says materials here, it says Unit 1 ML supports. And if you click on that link, you're going to be taken to the PACE toolkit for your grade level and Unit 1. And I want you to pause and take a couple minutes to look at that. Before you do, I'll just let you know, like the green column tells you what lesson number the supports were written for. And then what's in the purpley pink, that's information that might be lifted in PLC planning to build background knowledge for your ML students, linguistic support. And then the blue is content supports. That's on the right hand side here. Useful scaffolds and amplifications to use for content instruction. And that's for every activity, warm up, and all of those components of the lesson all year long. So take a couple minutes just to familiarize yourself with this resource. It will always be linked in the lesson, but it's a nice place for you to also look if you have a lot of ML learners in your building or in your classroom, where you can find support ideas for them as well. Remember to pause the video because as usual, I'm going to keep going in just a moment. All right, quick reminder about the PACE toolkit is that you'll want to be data driven. So as with the other supports that we have in the curriculum for just in time and accelerated learning, we want to think about your students, what your kids need, what you know about them, and what's going to help move them forward. It may be here and it may be here, but the more that you know about students and the more you know about what's already included in the curriculum, the better we can make those educated decisions for our students. So I want you to think about what your one takeaway is from accelerated learning. And on your KBQs, there may be a question about whether or not just-in-time supports can ensure all students can access grade level content. And my hope is that you would give that a thumbs up. All right. So just-in-time supports feel pretty new to us this year. So to support you in identifying some just-in-time supports this year, we're going to leverage our tidbits. So just-in-time supports are in the purple boxes, the monitoring, the materials, but sometimes we just also leverage our own expertise, right? So they're going to be ideas that are going to come up for you in planning and in PLCs and up for us too. So I write for second grade. As you can see here, Susan authors the tidbits for fifth grade. So as she's looking ahead, as I'm looking ahead for second grade and so on, I'm thinking about what's coming up in the next 5 lessons. Just for you to know, the tidbits are going to highlight some of those just-in-time supports that you might consider using with your students. And we're just basing that on our historical data and things we know that can be very tricky for students. So we hope that you'll come along for that with us through tidbits this year.
Let's take a look at our implementation snapshot. We have already mentioned that we had a pretty successful first year. Year 1 implementation, we focused on implementing with fidelity, learning new problem-based structure, and trusting the process. And these were all definitely Year 1 challenges. We have observed students discussing, representing, doing, and enjoying mathematics in our first year of implementation. When learning something new, we often find ourselves identifying what we can improve the next time around. Some pitfalls we notice along the way are noted here on the screen. We are going to think through why this happens, what the impact is, and how we can avoid them. In your note catcher, you will see a chart that looks exactly like this. It's right under your lesson. You will talk with your PLC and think through each of these challenges and why it happens, what the impact is, and how we can avoid them. Pause here and think through these together. Welcome back. When we did this activity in our live professional development, we gathered some answers from other schools. Let's look at teachers change the activities to be implemented as direct instruction model. Sometimes this happens because teachers struggle to switch the mindset that they've used with other programs. Sometimes we feel as if students are not getting it. If I show them, then they'll understand it better. However, when those things happen, the impact is that students rely more on teacher assistance than exploring themselves. They aren't doing the heavy lifting. They aren't able to make connections from what they already know to the new learning that's happening. So ways that we can avoid them is allow students to have more freedom with productive struggle, follow directions in the lesson and the suggestions there. You can also script out some questions you might ask if they're not already in the lesson to get students to advance their thinking. Let's look at parts of the lessons are skipped. For example, the activity or lesson synthesis. This might happen because of time constraints. Or maybe teachers feel like students aren't ready to move on. What impact does this have? Students may miss opportunities to make connections, or teachers might not be able to pull all of the ideas that students have to punctuate the learning goal of that activity or the lesson. So how can we avoid them? Planning with time constraints in mind. We need to stick to what the lesson tells us with timestamps throughout the whole lesson. It's really important to understand the flow and know that each section is time-stamped in a certain way and everything is intentional. The last scenario mentioned pacing of the lesson or activity is longer than recommended. Why does this happen? Teachers might be unfamiliar with the content or structure of the lesson, and they might feel that students need more time. Or maybe the teacher didn't even read the lesson and they're just going through the slides and feel that students need more time on certain things, what impact does that have? When our pacing is longer and we skip things because our pacing is longer, then we create gaps for students, and we don't want to create those gaps. If an activity is taking longer, we need to understand what the goal of the lesson is and why we only spend a certain amount of time on it. Maybe the connection is made in the second activity. We can avoid them by setting timers, making sure we understand the content. In planning, maybe we talk and discuss why each activity is the length that it is suggested. Hopefully you had some of these conversations with your PLC. Check for understanding time. Use thumbs up as true or thumbs down as false. It is important to include the activity and lesson synthesis to ensure that students solidify their understanding of the activity and lesson goals. Show your thumbs. This is a true statement. So, our year 2 goals, this is where we move from good to great. And if we know the content that we're teaching, plus understanding the standards of our grade level, in addition to knowing our students, we will be able to provide just-in-time supports. It's very exciting to know that now kindergarten through 5th grade all have 90 minutes in our instructional tenets for math. Kindergarten and 1st grade will join 2nd through 5th by having 60 minutes of their core lesson and then an additional 30 minutes for small groups. Now we'll get into some more grade level content.
4th grade, Unit 1, Unpacking. You may use the note catcher to jot down your noticings, ideas, and takeaways. Illustrative mathematic units are designed to build student mastery across the unit. We call this the story of the unit. Each lesson is part of the story that leads to mastery if implemented as intended. As we plan to implement a unit, we need to fully understand the story to best understand how to support student learning throughout the unit. Something important to note is that the flow of the units were considered with great care, and that pertains to units within the grade level, lessons within each unit, and units across grades. Together with the members of your PLC, look at the cool downs for lesson 1 and 2 to see if you can determine what the goal of the lesson is without looking at the lesson plan. Basing your thoughts solely on the purpose or objective of the cool down, and then discuss how these lessons build on one another or how they connect from previous lessons. Said differently, look at the cool downs that are contained within the participant deck. What do you think the goal of the lesson is based on the task that you see? How do you think those tasks connect or scaffold student learning and understanding? Pause the video now to collaborate with your PLC, and then we will come back together to discuss. I hope you've had time to discuss in your PLC what the goal of each of these lessons were, why you thought that, and how they are connected to each other. In Lesson 1, the goal of the lesson is to find areas of different rectangles with a given side length and to understand that the area of a rectangle is a multiple of each of its side lengths. The goals in Lesson 2 were to find side lengths of different rectangles with a given area and to understand that each side length of a rectangle is a factor of its area. In Lesson 1, students built upon their understanding of area and multiplication from 3rd grade by using inch tiles to build and draw rectangles with a given side length and reason about their areas. They learned that a multiple of a number is the result of multiplying that whole number by another. They also learned the term factor pair, recognizing the side lengths of each rectangle as a factor pair of its area. In Lesson 2, students were given areas. They built and drew rectangles of those given areas and were asked to find and reason about the side lengths. So in Lesson 1, we were learning about multiples, and in Lesson 2, we were learning about factors and factor pairs. Pause the video to look at Lessons 3 through 7 to determine what the goals of the lessons are. How do those lessons build on or connect to previous lessons to build the story of the unit? In Lesson 3, the goals of the lesson were to determine whether a given whole number in the range of 1 through 50 is prime or composite, and to find the factor pairs of a given whole number again from 1 to 50. The goal of Lesson 4 is for students to practice multiplication within 100, not negating the fact that there may be students who come to fourth grade that are not fluent in multiplication. Instead of practicing multiplication in isolation, we are embedding that practice throughout lessons, throughout activities, and throughout their use of centers. In Lesson 3, students are given a card sort to distinguish between areas that have more than one rectangle to represent the total and area that only have one rectangle. They are then introduced to definitions of prime and composite numbers, moving into identifying if a number is prime or composite based on the number of factor pairs it has. In Lesson 4, students identify multiplication facts within 100 that they do not fluently know and identify facts that they do know fluently to help them solve. They also play the centers game, Find the Number Factors, where they identify all the factors of a number to earn the most points, applying what they've learned from Lessons 1 through 3. Students also focused on building math community, creating safe spaces for themselves and others to see themselves as doers of mathematics. In Lesson 5, the goal was to apply understanding of multiplication and multiples in the range of 1 to 50 to solve real-world problems. The goal of Lesson 6 is to apply understanding of factors, multiples, prime, and composite numbers to solve problems. In Lesson 5, though the use of manipulatives may not be the primary focus because we are transitioning students into being able to apply what they've learned about factors, multiples, prime, and composite numbers through the use of manipulatives, that does not mean that some students are ready to move into representations using drawings or numbers. Students work on applying what they've learned in Section A to determine which number is a factor or multiple of another number, and even begin to think about leftovers, which is dipping slightly into NC4 OA3. In Lesson 6, Lockers 1 through 20, how many people will touch each locker based on the number that they have, expanding or expounding on application of understanding of prime and composite numbers. The goals of Lesson 7 are to determine whether a number from 1 to 50 is a multiple of another number and to find all factor pairs of a given whole number from 1 to 50. In Lesson 7, students build statements as seen here in the cool down of factors that lead into the centers game, Find the Number, Factors and Multiples. A lot of what I share with you about the story of the unit will begin to make sense, and you will be able to make connections to the work that you've previously done. Section A, Understanding Factors and Multiples, align with Lessons 1 through 4. Section B, Find Factor Pairs and Multiples, align with Lessons 5 through 7. Unit 1 serves as a unit of invitation, a way to invite students into a safe and supportive environment, a way to level the playing field by providing access to math for all students. Unit 1 serves as a building block to improving student access to the major work of the grade level. Throughout Unit 1, students get to play, observe, collaborate, share ideas, discuss, listen to their peers' way of thinking, and engage with content that is relatable and fresh. Unit 1 also serves as a basis for building a positive math community and helps students to see themselves as doers of mathematics, which is an integral part of the story. Think about how much student self esteem is built and boosted during this unit. Section B serves as consolidation and where students get to apply the learning that took place in Section A. To give you a synopsis of the unit, we can think of each lesson as a chapter within the story. And on the screen underneath the lesson is like the gist of each lesson. Students explore rectangles, which activates concepts of multiplication and area of rectangles from third grade. The lessons move into students making new observations about the relationship between like pairs of side lengths and area. Geometric content is very helpful here for helping students to conceptualize prime and composite numbers using concrete representations before students make sense of numbers in abstract situations. The experiences throughout this unit also develop students' multiplicative reasoning, which is a foundational skill that involves understanding and applying relationships between quantities using multiplication and division, which in turn provides access for more students in upcoming units that involve major work standards of fourth grade. Throughout these lessons in Section A, the goals are to determine if a number is prime or composite, explain what it means to be a factor or a multiple of a number, and to relate the side lengths and area of a rectangle to factors and multiples. Hopefully, while going through the goal of each lesson and uncovering the unit's trajectory, discovering how the lessons build upon one another, how the lessons are connected, scaffolded, and recognizing the continuum of learning, you are able to see and understand the purpose and intent behind the structure of lessons throughout Unit 1. There is a concept that needs to be built first, and we do not want to interrupt the story by taking away opportunities for students to create and develop meaning on their own. What we know to be true, based on years of research, is that when students make sense of the content in which they are learning and we guide them in connecting the concrete work to those big, major ideas, they can later easily access the information and apply that information when needed, which helps shape their neural functions responsible for receiving and processing information and the ability to critically think. Throughout Section B, the goals of those lessons are to apply multiplication fluency within 100 and the relationship between multiplication and division to find factor pairs and multiples. Now in your PLCs, you will unpack the Unit 1 standards using the unpacking template contained within your note catcher. We will now unpack NC4OA4. You will be using the table you see on the screen, which is contained within your note catcher. We implemented this graphic organizer over the summer during Camp CMS. For most of you, it will be brand new. It is meant to provide you with a jumping off point for standard unpacking. The standard that you are unpacking may exceed the expectations provided in the current unit. Keep that in mind as you are unpacking. You should be making specific connections from the unit to the standard and the parameters of both. We know that after looking through the unit and thinking about the progression of the grade level and the data we saw during our celebration, that the content students need in North Carolina will be covered. You can trust the story. Read through the standard, read through the clarification section, and the checking for understanding sections of the unpacking document, and discuss in your PLC how the lessons in Unit 1 build towards student mastery of the standard, utilizing the note catcher to document verbs, number parameters, strategies, vocabulary, just in time supports, etc. Some of the big ideas of NC4OA4 are to demonstrate an understanding of factors and multiples of whole numbers up to and including 50, which builds on the third grade work of side lengths and area. Some academic vocabulary that is needed for this standard include side lengths, area, factors, factor pair, multiples, prime, and composite. Strategies that are used throughout this standard include concrete objects such as inch tiles and grid paper, drawings and labels, the ability to relate multiples to factors through exploration with arrays, and exploring and discovering patterns that build conceptual understanding of prime and composite. Some number parameters that exist in this standard are up to and including 50 and single digit factors. Some representation that are used, side lengths in rectangles, relating those to factors in the area and relating that to multiples. Skip counting is a strategy, the ability to skip count by a given number to determine if it is a factor. This standard does address conceptual understanding, procedural skill and fluency, and application. And verbs that exist in this standard are for students to find factor pairs, to recognize a whole number is a multiple of its factor, and to determine if a number is a multiple of another number, and prime and composite to determine prime if a number is prime or composite. And this work connects to prior and future learning by making connections between factors and multiples and relating multiplication and division. It builds on third grade understanding of side lengths and area, which is standard NC3 MD5. It builds on work with factors and the relationship between multiplication and division in third grade. Understanding how much students have already explored about these relationships should help you trust that your students will be able to apply what they've previously explored to play the centers games and to dive into grade 4 activities. This unit does lead to or serve as invitation to students playing with multiplication and deepening their understanding of properties of multiplication before they apply them in units 5 and 6 by using area models to make sense of partial products. Here they multiply and divide by small factors, furthermore helping to build and reinforce fluency from third grade. They also reinforce the relationship between arrays, area, and multiplication. So in making a plan to continue the work, next steps would be to, now that we have unpack the story of the unit by looking at the unit overview and the section overviews. We have unpacked the standard by completing this organizer. A next logical step would be to unpack the assessment if you have not already. One key thing to make sure that students, or another just in time support to make sure we are aware of and provide for students to make sure they have access, is an anchor chart for the vocabulary words that contain the word, the definition, maybe some pictorial examples of connections between side lengths and factors and areas and multiples, and the difference between prime and composite numbers and why those numbers may be prime or composite based on that geometric context, and providing rectangular arrays to prove why a number is prime versus composite and vice versa. Some of the data we've seen on our last year's Unit 1 assessment had a lot to do with students not deeply understanding the differences between factors and multiples and prime and composite. I appreciate your time today.
Hi everyone, back to me. This is Hannah Woods for the What's New, What's Not portion of our time together. For me, this is the most exciting part because I get to show you all of the things that we've been working on that are new for 25-26 school year. Very exciting right off the bat is that K and 1 have now 90 minutes for math instruction. Last year, K and 1 had 60 minutes for their block of time. Now we have 90 minutes. That means that we have 60 minutes for the math lesson, for the math block, and then 30 additional minutes for small groups. We heard you, there was not enough time in that kindergarten and first grade lesson to adequately provide small group instruction, and so we are providing the 30 minutes in the instructional tenets, rounding out every grade K through 5 to receive 90 minutes of mathematics. Very exciting stuff. Also, we have our IMCMS workbooks. We have worked so hard to provide you these workbooks. We understand that this is version 1.0, but we are super excited to say that workbooks are currently being delivered to all sites in English. What you will notice in these workbooks is that after the table of contents, each lesson has their own student-facing lesson pages. After the student-facing lesson, you will see practice problems. After the lessons and practice problems, you will see a section called cool downs. We did this intentionally because sometimes students continue to flip a page and keep going. We put the cool downs at the end of the workbook. You can also see that noted in the table of contents. And after the cool downs, you will see the additional resources. What this means is that students will not need you to print anything further. The additional resources are at the back of the book. It will include card sorts, pictures, graphs, number cards, and different things that are needed within the lessons. Another new idea in Math Rocks, when you click on the grade level button and then your unit, you will no longer see folders of lessons and slides. Instead, you will go through the curriculum guide. This is imperative to see updates and resources and every bit of quick information at a glance. Remember as well to scroll all the way down to the bottom of the curriculum guide to see those pink small group ideas. You'll see the small group resources at the end of the curriculum guide of every single curriculum guide for every single unit. This upcoming school year, we're also super excited to say that we are adding all practice problems into your Canvas courses that you get through Infinite Campus. You will receive these Canvas courses and they will have the practice problems with some questions adjusted to be tech enhanced. This is to support you in coaching your students through different styles of tech-enhanced questions that students will see on the MVPA as well as the EOG. You will be able to provide these through Canvas. They are Mastery Connect quizzes, and students will be able to access them in a way that you decide. Right now on the screen, you can see the model as using the table of content pages that are already preloaded within your Canvas course, but you can decide how you would like students to access these activities. They will be through Mastery Connect and therefore can be accessed through your Canvas courses. Based on statewide feedback, NCDPI updated the clarifications and checks for understanding for select math standards. These improvements will strengthen current understandings of identified math content and provide additional ways to assess student learning. Please note that the checks for understandings listed in the unpacking documents are not exhaustive. This is not new, but still important. To access Elementary Math Rocks, you will need to go through Launchpad using the click path on the screen you see. In Math Rocks, you will gain access to all of the IMCMS curriculum. This is where we will house the most updated district resources. This year, we will be continuing to use our IMCMS math curriculum, and the math team has provided a scope and sequence as well as a year at a glance for each grade level K through 5. The year at a glance includes instructional days, assessment windows, and flex days. In 3rd through 5th, the year at a glance calendars also include reassessment days to the extent possible, as well as end of the year review lesson days. Remember to try and remain within 2 weeks or 10 instructional days of the scope and sequence to ensure all students have access to grade level content and standards. For an example, in 5th grade, units 1 through 3 are to be taught before the MVPA window, which opens on November 17th, and any standards covered in those first 3 units could be assessed on the first MVPA. Flex days have been provided on the year at a glance and can be used as additional support using your student data, and can be for playing centers, small group instruction, assessments or reassessments, and responding to MVPA and state and district mandated testing data. Math Rocks includes easy to find North Carolina Standard Course of Study aligned materials, but what we do not recommend is creating testing packets and instituting intensive test preparation or student practice that is not aligned to our North Carolina Standard Course of Study. Decades of research tells us that traditional models of instruction, of the teacher telling the student how to solve and students listening, or students practice and the teacher corrects, is flawed. Traditional instructional methods may get short-term results with procedural skills, but students tend to forget the procedural skills and do not develop problem-solving skills, deep conceptual understanding, or a mental framework for how ideas fit together. They also don't develop strategies for tackling non-routine problems, including a propensity for engaging in productive struggle to make sense of problems and persevere in solving them. In order to learn mathematics, students should spend time in math class doing mathematics. Students learn mathematics as a result of solving problems. Mathematical ideas are the outcomes of the problem-solving experience rather than the elements that must be taught before problem solving. Students should take an active role, both individually and in a group, to see what they can figure out before having things explained to them or being told how or what to do. You play a critical role in mediating student learning, but that role looks different than simply showing, telling, and correcting. Your role is to ensure students understand the context and what is being asked, to ask questions to advance student thinking in productive ways, to help students share their work and understand others' work through orchestrating productive discussions, and finally, to synthesize the learning with students at the end of the activities and the lesson. You should build on what students already know. New mathematical ideas are built on what students already know about the math in the world. And as they learn new ideas, students need to make connections between them. In order to do this, teachers need to understand what knowledge students bring to the classroom and monitor what they do and do not understand as they are learning. Teachers must themselves know how the mathematical ideas connect in order to support student learning. And finally, a few more supports. To support leadership, we have the core action checklist. This can be found in the important links on Math Rocks. The environmental checklist. This can also be found in the important links on Math Rocks on the homepage of Math Rocks. And curriculum essentials. This is a digital resource that leadership as well as teachers have access to through Math Rocks. In terms of support for families, on the CMS website, there are family letters, unit videos, and at-home resources. Be sure to check out those family resources that are referenced in this slide. This year, all 3rd through 5th assessments will be in Mastery Connect, and you all can expect them 2 weeks prior to the date that they are listed in the YAG. In kindergarten, 1st and 2nd, unit rating guides, the MOY and summative will be in Mastery Connect to assist you in determining a rating for standards based on assessment tasks, checklists, checkpoints, practice problems, cool downs, and of course, observations. Thank you so much for spending time with me today. We are now moving on to our KBQs and attendance. There are 2 forms that you will be completing for this back to school 25-26 math time together. The first is for the math team attendance and knowledge-based questions. This bit.ly says 4LYYKY capital U. You must type this bit.ly in exactly, as seen on the screen, capitalization matters, in order to access this math team Google form. You must also be logged in with your CMS credentials in either Google Form, in either Google Chrome, Safari, or perhaps you're using Microsoft Edge. Take a moment to complete this, and once you have, you will be provided the bit.ly to get to the attendance and feedback for CMS Professional Learning. You will need to reference this screen as you are completing this survey for question number 3, number 5, number 10, and number 11. Please include your 5-digit CMS employee ID, the attendance code, which is back to school or B2S math, the content area PD, scroll to other and type in ELEM math, standing for elementary math, the name of the PD, elementary curriculum implementation updates, and finally the course code. That is capital ECI11. Please reference this slide as you complete the CMS Professional Learning attendance and feedback form. That is all we have time for here together. Please let me know if you have any questions. My email is hannah.g.woods, and we hope that you are enjoying your back to school time and excited to receive students in just a short week. Take care.